Ah, the real monsters. The city never slept, but under the city, it snored. It gurgled. It burped. Pipes rattled like bones, storm drains hummed, and the tunnels made a music that only monsters could dance to. Down there, past the slime-slick ladders and the kudzu of old cables, the underground academy of applied scaring buzzed with midnight energy. Lockers with teeth snapped shut, a bulletin board oozed notices, and the cafeteria line slithered forward as students carried bowls of screaming noodles that tried to escape their forks. Merc shuffled along with his backpack clinking jars of borrowed eyeballs, glowworms, and one jar labeled, "Do not open, seriously." Merc was short, bony as a clothes hanger, and always wore a construction cone like a hat because it made him feel taller and also because it glowed faintly in the dark after rainstorms. He had a gift for gadgets that shouldn't exist and an unfortunate habit of anxious chatter that sounded like a swarm of gnats. Tonight, he whispered to himself, "We do not set anything on fire. Tonight we pass midterm mayhem with flying, oozing colors." Behind him clomped Greta, all knuckles and knees, a brick-red brute with a heart that didn't quite fit her ribcage, so it rode high and thumped loudly when she cared about stuff, which was always. She wore a belt of manhole cover medals she'd earned for rescues during flash floods, and she'd sooner eat chalk than admit she liked poetry. Her grin had a chip in it from head-butting a subway train, the train lost. Slink came last, flowing rather than walking. He was sleek, midnight blue, with a face that could fold into anything from harmless puddle to oh no run. Slink collected shadows the way kids collect stickers, and he stored them in his sleeves for emergencies. You never knew when you'd need extra darkness. They were late. Dean Gullet's bell, a great rusty triangle struck by a bone, had already clanged 3 times and gone back to wheezing. The hallway ahead swelled with students funneling into Scare Tactics 201. Merc's cone bobbed above the crowd as he squeezed through. Greta cleared space with one gentle elbow, and Slink slipped like smoke under the door. Professor Ragmouth's classroom smelled like wet newspapers in victory. Jars of pickled shrieks lined the shelves, and a chalk diagram on the wall showed silhouettes of surface dwellers: delivery human, easy start, night janitor, medium, security guard, advanced, beware flashlights. Ragmouth scratched a lesson plan into the board with a claw that threw sparks. "Midterm mayhem," he purred, "begins at the stroke of 13 o'clock. Your team objective, 3 scares, 3 sights, returning 1 proof of panic and 1 token of terror. Fail, and you'll be reassigned to courtesy growls in the library." Groans. Nobody wanted courtesy growls. Librarian Mossblossom enforced whisper snarls only, and her pet fungus shushed louder than thunder. Ragmouth's tongue spat a timer onto the desk. It ticked in reverse, fogging the glass. "Teams of 3, he grinned. "Try not to maim any municipal infrastructure. Last time someone melted a bus schedule." Merc felt the timer's chill from across the room. He raised a bony hand. "Professor, quick logistical query about the rule set regarding." Ragmouth's eye swiveled. "No explosions." Merc's hand drooped. "Right. Of course. Hypothetically. The room erupted into partner grabs, tail knots, tentacle high fives. Merc, Greta, and Slink already knew they were stuck with each other. Their names were etched together on a detention bench from 3 weeks prior when a practice haunt turned a subway station into a phone party. They huddled under a dripping pipe in the corridor to plan. Merc unfurled a city map he'd stitched from discarded wrappers. Targets, the moonlit laundromat, the museum of miniature chairs, and the rooftop garden atop Building 77. 3 scares, escalating difficulty. I brought prototypes. He patted his bag. It burbled resentfully. Greta cracked her knuckles, which sounded like bowling balls. No explosions, she reminded gently. Slink tugged at a shadow thread and spun it into a scarf around his neck. We go quiet. Precision scares. 1 shriek apiece, nice and tidy, then home for celebratory slime shakes. The timer somewhere far away coughed out a 13th chime that no human ear could hear. The contest had begun. They rose through old storm stairs that wept soot and memory, up to a manhole ringed with luminous fungus. Merc peered through the cracks. The street was empty except for a raccoon committee discussing a French fry. He levered the lid, and cool night air flooded the tunnel. The city above yawned, alleys snored, neon signs winked like lazy cats, and high windows blinked sleepily at their own reflections. The moonlit laundromat always ran like a dream after midnight, washing machines humming sea songs, a single tired human folding towels under the bright soft buzz of fluorescent lights. Tonight, a night manager with a coffee for dozed behind the counter. Greta pressed a hand to the glass. We go gentle. Slink melted through the door seam, looped the chain from the inside, and cracked it open. Merc scuttled beneath with his bag clinking. Greta simply breathed in and squeezed through the gap like a friendly avalanche. Bells jangled, the manager jerked, blinked, settled. The TVs on the wall played a channel about nothing but weather maps and nostalgia. Merc rolled out Prototype 1, the polite polterrinse, a soap bubble that trapped whispers. He clipped tiny bat wings to it, patted it, and let it drift toward the nearest washer. Slink slipped into the chrome reflection, turned his head upside down inside the shine, and watched as the machine's glass porthole fogged, from the outside. Letters formed in suds, FOLDFASTER. The pile of towels beside the human swelled, then deflated like a sigh. Greta rearranged laundry baskets with hands so gentle the plastic didn't creak. She stacked them in a wobbly spiral, a tower that leaned the wrong way, defying angles. Then she put a single sock on top like a flag and squinted until her eyes glowed with faint furnace light. The manager looked up. The sock rotated on its own axis. The slogan on the wall, "Clean today, cleaner tomorrow," flipped letters around until it whispered, "Leave now." The bubble drifted over the counter and popped with a hiss of lavender whispers exactly in the manager's ear. He bolted, tumbling through the doorway, bell jangling like a fire alarm. Slink caught the moment on a fear film strip he kept in his sleeve, proof of panic. Merc scooped a coin from the change dish, token of terror, and put a nicer one back. Onward, he chirped, stuffing away the bubble wings. The washers kept humming as if pleased to have a story to tell other washers in the morning. Outside, the city had tuned itself a little darker. Clouds sealed the moon. Street puddles reflected stars they'd borrowed from some other sky. Greta sniffed the air and frowned. "Do you smell that?" It was a faint cinnamon scent, warm and wrong underground. Merc shook his cone. "Probably just pretzels." Slink's shadow scarf tightened. "Or Proctor's." No student loved the Proctor's serpentine silhouettes that slunk along walls enforcing rules no one remembered until they broke them. Something slick shifted near a dumpster and was still. The three moved on with deliberate casualness. The Museum of Miniature Chairs was as silent as a swallowed secret. Its glass facade displayed 100 tiny thrones on velvet, a thimble-sized rocking chair for a moth grandparent, a porcelain stool the size of a sugar cube, a matchstick recliner that looked sinfully comfortable. Inside, motion sensors blinked like sleepy fireflies. "Precision," Slink breathed. He slid under the door like spilled ink. Merc followed, placing little rubber feet over his own bony toes to confuse the pressure mats. Greta remained outside, counting to 100 and humming to calm her heart. Night guard asleep in a swivel chair. Security camera panning in slow drunk arcs. Merc unrolled Prototype 2, the charismatic swivel, a remote heart he'd built from a retired metronome and an old pigeon leg band. He stuck it under the guard's chair with a dab of gum, then winked at Slink. "On my mark." Slink took a mouthful of the guard's shadow. The room cooled. Merc clicked the metronome once. The swivel chair turned gently left, pausing, right, pausing, then spun a quarter turn to face the glass case of tiny thrones. The guard mumbled, chuckled, slumped. Merc clicked again. The tiniest rocking chair began to rock. Click. The sugar cube stool scooted half an inch. Click, click. The matchstick recliner reclined. On its own. Slowly. Seductively. A whisper threaded the air like lint, sit. The guard stood with a noise somewhere between huh and nope. Every miniature chair pointed at him. Slink let the shadows slip back across the guard's shoes like cats. A hairline crack tiptoed across the glass case. The guard decided he had seen enough of museums for his entire life. Sprint. Door. Gone. Merc grabbed a ticket stub from the guard's pocket as a token. Slink tucked the footage away. Greta snorted a laugh when they tumbled out onto the sidewalk. 2 down, she said. 1 to go. It should have felt easier from there. But the city had that feeling it gets just before a storm, the air's first standing on end. A low rumble wandered the blocks, a bus complained in the distance, thunder remembered an old argument. They cut through an alley where posters peeled in long tongues and a stray piano key lay in a puddle looking guilty. Slink's sleeve shadow tugged his wrist. Someone's following. Pretzels, Merc offered again, smaller. The rooftop garden on 7-7 was everybody's favorite failed secret, a patchwork jungle of forgotten plants tended by no one and watered by weather. It glittered under weak city stars, tomato cages like skeleton Ferris wheels, mint bushes running feral, sunflowers who'd learned to love moonlight. Wind spoke in leaf language. The building's elevator was allergic to them, so they took the stairs, laughing at their own wheezes and the way Greta's heartbeat clanged on every landing like a victory drum. At the final flight, the door latch smiled at Slink and opened itself. He bowed. They stepped into a world that smelled like green. Merc's cone dimmed to be polite. Greta knelt and touched the soil. Alive, she murmured, reverent. Don't wreck it. On the far side of the garden, under a pergola that pretended to be a forest, a lone human stood with a watering can. Not a guard. Not an interloper. Just a night gardener with dirt under their nails and headphones in their ears. Their music was tinny and hopeful. Merc swallowed. Is it wrong to scare someone who's making things grow? Slink's shadow scarf eased, loosening like a sigh. We're not here to hurt. We're here to nudge. A scare can be a story told to the heart. Greta rolled her shoulders, then did the smallest, kindest roar the city had ever not quite heard. Leaves shivered. The gardener looked up, suspicious. Merc reached into his bag and pulled out Prototype 3, the weather of Hush, a jar of last week's fog he'd taught to make shapes. He unscrewed the lid. The fog climbed out like a shy animal and sniffed the mint. Slink stepped away and blended gently into a trellis. The fog learned his outline and borrowed it. For a brief breath, there were two Slinks, the real one and a fog ghost, both thin as stories, both kind. The fog ghost walked across the bed of time and paused at the gardener's elbow. It raised a hand and made the universal sign for listen. Then it pointed to the horizon. Clouds were arriving, heavy and bright at their edges. Lightning flossed its teeth behind them. The gardener took out an earbud. Wind shook the sunflower's ribs. The fog ghost whispered by changing shape, a watering can tilting, a glass filling, a flood cresting stairs. The gardener understood. They glanced at the storm drains along the roof's edge, clogged with last season's leaves. They dropped the can, fell to their knees, and started clearing. Fast. The first slab of rain hit like applause. Water rushed to meet the freed drains, swirled the right way, vanished safely into the city's thirsty throat. Greta's grin could have lit half a block. We didn't even scare them. We saved their garden. Slink shrugged, soft. Sometimes the best scare is a warning arriving before the fear. Merc caught a single raindrop in a vial, token of terror? Maybe token of tender. He didn't know what Ragmouth would say, but the jar glowed faintly, warmly, as if the sky approved. And then the door behind them opened without anyone touching it. Something long and lacquer black uncoiled through the doorway and draped itself across the floor like spilled tar. A proctor. Its edges were not edges. Its smile was an absence. It did not have eyes. It had a way of looking that made you want to tidy your soul. Students, it said in a voice like a stapler. Rule 9, no interference with surface weather systems. Greta stepped forward. We didn't. We cleared drains. Rule 12, it continued blandly, no collaborating with surface dwellers. Slink bowed slightly. We collaborated with rain and gravity. The proctor's smile widened until you could see the idea of your own reflection falling in. Dean Gullett will enjoy the debate. Merck's knees went fizzy. He had a jar labeled "Do Not Open." He'd never opened it. He didn't even remember exactly why he'd made it. A favor to himself from a future he hoped would be wiser. He pulled it out. The jar hummed low, nostalgic, like a lullaby played on a radiator. Please, Merck whispered, and cracked the seal. The jar released a smell of old summer basements, chalk dust, orange peels, and the exact relief of a power outage when homework time has arrived. The proctor's shape lost its crispness. Its edges went soft. It paused, considering the existential merits of naps. Rain thickened, the roof garden bowed under its own freshened weight, and the city beyond blurred into something that might have been a painting. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened at all, which was everything. Slink grabbed Merck's shoulder. Greta took the other. They danced backward, 3 steps, the kind of steps you only learn when your classroom has no walls and your teachers sometimes hiss. The proctor exhaled, resolidified, folded itself back through the door, and left without issuing a citation. Perhaps even proctors loved gardens. They laughed like people do when the wolf has passed and their feet still believe in running. Merck put the jar away and wrote "Do Not Open" again on the lid. Greta patted a sunflower. Slink collected a handful of storm darkness for later. They slipped back to the manhole as the storm fattened, the city swallowing the rain with wide, grateful gulps. Underground, the academy chimed the end of mayhem. Students dripped into the hall, giddy and muddy, bearing trophies, a security badge, a mall map with a bite out of it, a photograph of a statue crying ketchup. Ragmouth stood at the front desk, claws clicking like knitting needles. Proofs, he purred. Merck offered the fear film from the laundromat, the museum ticket stub, and, hesitating, the raindrop in a vial. Ragmouth lifted it to the light. The drop glowed pollen yellow. He said, which is professor for I did not expect this and now must invent a rubric. He held it to his ear and it made the smallest clink, like a thank you from a gutter. Ragmouth's grin slanted. Advanced improvisation. Points for mercy. Deductions for none. Pass. Greta hooped and headbutt the ceiling tile, which squeaked but forgave her. Slink bowed at the drop, because rain is an old god in every city. Merc removed his cone, polished a smudge, and put it back on like a crown. Night rolled on. The cafeteria served celebratory sludge with confetti of edible paper. A hallway pipe sang off-key about triumph. The library fungus permitted an uncharacteristically loud hush. They sprawled on a bench that sighed happily under their weight. Greta braided a strip of caution tape into Merc's backpack strap. Slink taught his shadow scarf to smell like basil. "You think we're cut out for this?" Merc asked the floor. "Real scares, big ones, the kind that change a city for a minute?" Greta shrugged the whole world. "We didn't break anything. We made something better." Slink lay back and watched a drip from the ceiling attempt a very slow cartwheel. "Scaring isn't breaking," he murmured. "It's reminding. People forget the night has teeth." We lended a smile. From somewhere down the tunnel, a distant alarm hiccuped and then decided to try again later. Somebody's locker belched and apologized. Dean Gullett's bell cleared its throat like an elderly toad and muttered something about curfew. Merc's jar of rain pulsed once in his pocket, warm as a palm. He thought about the gardener on the roof, how scared and brave could be the same shape if you looked from the right angle. He wondered if the city, up there, ever dreamed about the things that loved it from underneath. He hoped so. "Next time," he said, half to himself, "I'll bring a better umbrella." "Next time," Greta grinned, "we'll bring the whole storm." "Next time," Slink whispered, "we'll teach the thunder to purr." They fell asleep on the bench, Greta sitting up with her chin on her fists, Merc curled around his bag of inventions, Slink half melted into the shadow of the seat. The academy dimmed its lights the way old theaters lower chandeliers before magic. The city above exhaled. Pipes ticked. Drains told stories of leaves and coins and lost earrings, and under everything the faintest applause of water going exactly where it needed to go. In the morning that wasn't, underground mornings are a matter of consensus. Ragmouth as chalk wrote their names on a board under past, with panache. Librarian Mossblossom pretended not to be proud and reshelled the hiss. The proctor in charge of Rule 12 filed a report that smelled faintly of mint and refused to stay stapled. Somewhere on a roof, a gardener drank coffee thick as courage and smiled at the sky without knowing why. And under the city that snored and gurgled and burped, 3 friends counted the beats until the next bell, because fear was fun if you were the one telling it when to jump.